Dear listener, welcome back to the 111 Tips for Learning a Language. You are listening to episode 94, and today we are taking a counterintuitive turn. We are not going to talk about positive thinking, manifestation, or cheerleading ourselves into success. Instead, we are going to ask, what if looking on to the negative side, or pessimism, or at least a sober, non-positive realism could be the very thing that makes you happier, less stressed, and ultimately more effective language learner. We have been sold a story that learning a language is supposed to feel joyful and upward sloping. There's always a steady progress, constant motivation, and an inevitable march towards fluency. But the lived reality for most learners is different. It's a path full of plateaus, frustrations, forgotten vocabulary, and the quiet shame of not being good enough. What if, instead of resisting this reality, you embrace it? What if staring into the abyss of difficulty was precisely what allowed you to finally relax and enjoy the process? Let's explore 3 lenses of pessimism that can actually free you in your language journey. Point 1. The freedom of reality-based action. Optimistic advice often tells you to visualize your future fluent self, ordering coffee in Paris, or perhaps giving a speech in Tokyo in Japanese, or blending seamlessly into a new language community. While this can be motivating at first, this advice comes with hidden chains. You act in a state of tense hope. You're always wondering if today's effort is enough to bridge the gap to that imagined future. And when your progress is slow, that hope can quickly curdle into anxiety and self-blame. The point is that there is always going to be a perceived future where you envisage and you feel stress because you know you should get there by your positive thinking. You try to deny the creeping anxiety and label it as positive stress, which is supposedly good for you, when in reality you fear the difficult process of getting anywhere at all, and whether or not that desired language fluency is actually achievable. The pessimist, by contrast, stares reality in the face. The question for a pessimist becomes simple. Is learning this language point, or listening to this podcast, or stumbling through this conversation inherently worthwhile? If yes, then the act of awareness and the action of going through is in its own satisfaction. Psychologists Edward Deci and Deci Ryan have shown that intrinsic motivation, which is basically doing something for its inherent value, produces greater persistence, deeper learning, and higher satisfaction than external reward seeking. You are no longer chasing a utopia of perfect fluency. You are simply valuing the practice itself. And paradoxically, this makes you calmer, steadier, and more consistent. Point 2. The liberating weight of your burden. We often try to hack into or lighten the load of language learning. We download the perfect app, design the perfect schedule, or convince ourselves that sheer effort will ultimately guarantee success. But here lies the myth of sufficient effort. Sometimes, no matter how much you study, a grammar concept won't click immediately. Sometimes real life leaves you with only 5 stolen minutes on public transport to study what you can. Then again, you cannot concentrate because you perceive the eyes of all those people staring at you. The pessimist hypothesis is radical. Just stop trying to lighten the burden. Acknowledge that your time is limited and that some aspects of learning will remain difficult or even irredeemably constrained. By facing this truth, you give yourself permission to stop struggling against the impossible. The surrender is not in giving up. It is releasing yourself from the myth of total control. Listen, you do not have total control of everything. It is a fact. Research published in Anxiety, Stress and Coping shows that acceptance-based approaches reduce distress and allow students to engage more fully with their studies. By accepting the constraints, you stop measuring progress against a fantasy. 5 words learned today are no longer a pathetic drop in an infinite ocean. They are instead viewed as 5 beautiful, solid additions to your mind. And once your struggle ceases, you relax. You appreciate the process itself. And in that relaxed state, your memory and retention actually improve. Neuroscience reminds us that stress impairs on the hippocampus, which is the part of your brain responsible for consolidating new memories. By dropping the unnecessary battle, you create the conditions for deeper learning when you appreciate and understand more. Point 3. Your ship has already sailed, and that's okay. Many learners hold back because they fear failure. They brace themselves before every conversation. They dread mistakes. Yet Zen teacher Mel Witzman offers a radical truth. Suffering comes from believing there is a way out of being human. That is not true. There is no way out of being human. Human beings do fail. So, you will naturally fail. You will forget. You will stumble. And that is inevitable. Think of it this way. The ship to your dream destination, which will sail to your perfect, fluent life, has already sunk the moment you were born mortal. You are a finite creature with limited time, limited energy, and limited opportunities given your surroundings. There are no guarantees, except that holding back from speaking, from trying, and from living, and from being assertive is a recipe for regret. Dr. Julie Norem's research on defensive pessimism shows how expecting things to go wrong can actually reduce stress and improve performance. By rehearsing possible failures, defensive pessimists prepare thoroughly, adjust their expectations, and often perform just as well as optimists, but with much less anxiety. When you accept that mistakes are certain and that you will never have infinite time, you stop bracing for your ship to sink. Remember, your ship is already at the bottom of the ocean. You can just salvage what you can. What's left is to use your precious hours wisely, whether it is to engage in conversation, to practice the sentence, or to embrace fully your learning journey. Closing thoughts. So, perhaps the path to happier, less stressed language learning is not paved with relentless positivity. Instead, it is a clear-eyed embrace of pessimism. Pessimism does not mean that you are unhappy with your language learning. In fact, pessimism is the sustainable way to happiness. Encoded in our DNA, humans are programmed to remember unpleasant memories more than pleasant ones. But it doesn't mean that you cannot be happy if you are a pessimist. Pessimism frees you from the tyranny of imagined futures. It gives you permission to accept limits and drop your unnecessary struggle. And it reminds you that your mortality and your failures are not catastrophes, but the very ground on which real learning takes place. When you stop demanding that today's effort guarantees tomorrow's perfection, you free yourself to inhabit the imperfect but beautiful present time of learning. And in that freedom, you may just find more joy, more consistency, and ironically, more fluency and mastery in the language you are learning. Until the next time, I wish you the peace of realistic expectations and the calm joy of learning without hope, but with presence and acceptance of the process itself. Namaste.